Hello, my name is Danielle Vieira and today I'll be reading my children's short story entitled Mara and the Mugwump, which was in this anthology entitled Tell Them They're Dreaming, Bedtime, Ballads and Tall Tales from the Australian Bush, published by Share Your Story. The branch wobbled under Mara's feet as her brother skipped along it and leapt into the sky. She peeked past a clump of leaves and watched as Katy stretched out his four legs and soared to the next tree. "Come on, Mara," he yelled, "you can do it." Mara looked down. The ground was so far away. She took one step and then two more. On her fourth step, the branch started to bend. Soon she could feel her toes slipping on the slick surface. With a squeak, she scurried back to the safety of the tree hollow nest. "I'm going to fall," she called out, then hid her face in her fluffy tail. A rustle of leaves drew Mara's big black eyes upwards. Mrs. Possum sat on the branch above her, nibbling on a plum. "What's wrong, my dear?" she asked between bites. "I'm a sugar glider, but I'm too scared to glide," Mara whimpered. "Well, that is a problem." Mrs. Possum popped the last piece of plum into her mouth and swallowed. "Maybe you should talk to the Mugwump. He's the cleverest creature in the bush, so he'll know how to help you." Mara sat up, her nose twitching. "Where can I find him?" Mrs. Possum wiped her whiskers with her paws. "He lives on an island in the middle of the great Billabong." Mara poked her head out of the tree hollow. Her eyes followed the trunk to the earth below. She's never set her foot on the ground, as Mum had told her and Katy that it was dangerous. But she wanted to fly like the other sugar gliders. "I'll do it," Mara declared, and she scampered down the trunk before she could change her mind. When she reached the curtain-like roots that swished along the ground before diving beneath the soil, Mara stopped and gazed up. A sea of green rippled in the wind as birds squawked good nights and hooted hellos to each other. Around her, the forest floor cackled with unseen life. Strange smells drifted past. Mara rubbed her nose, trying to slow her fluttering heart. Suddenly, a tiny lizard darted out from a nearby bush. "Excuse me, do you know the way?" Mara began to say, but the lizard scuttled off before she could finish her question. "Are you lost?" rumbled a voice behind her. Mara spun around with a gasp and tumbled off the root. As she lay there, a dark nose surrounded by long whiskers loomed over her. Two eyes blinked from a broad face of brown fur. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to frighten you." Mara took a deep breath and wriggled back to her feet. "I'm looking for the great Billabong." The wombat grunted and trundled towards a fern shooting feathery fronds in all directions. Mara sighed and started searching for someone else to help her. "Well, are you coming?" the wombat asked. Clicking happily, Mara bounded over to her new friend. The wombat lifted one of the fronds with his head, revealing a narrow path through the undergrowth. "This trail will take you to the great Billabong. Be careful, little one." "Thank you," said Mara, and she scooted under the wombat's hairy chin. As she made her way along the track, her feet skidded on slivers of wet bark and sank into piles of rotting leaves. Every so often, she had to scramble over a fallen tree that was covered in slimy moss. After a while, Mara's tummy began to gurgle. She snuffled around in the leaf litter, trying to find tasty insects. Nearby, a hollow log beckoned. She peered inside and jumped back when a forked tongue lashed her nose. "Hello, sweetie," the snake hissed. Scales shimmered black in the twilight as his slender body slid out of the log and slithered in a circle to face her. He lifted his head, exposing a fiery belly. Mara gulped and tried to sidle under the nearest bush. "Stop! I just want to speak to you." He swayed towards Mara, tongue darting in and out. Shaking on the spot, Mara scouted around for somewhere to hide. Then she grinned. As the snake's fangs moved closer and closer, Mara bent down. She quickly picked up a stick and smacked the snake on the nose with all the strength she could muster. Ow! That hurts!" shouted the snake in shock. His food shouldn't fight back. He shook his head and slunk away into the forest. Mara danced around, waving the stick in the air. A kookaburra laughed from his perch far above her. As the cackle ebbed away, a new sound washed over the scene. Splish, splosh, splash. "That must be an animal playing in the great Billabong," cried Mara. Carrying her stick, she dashed in the direction of the noise. Before long, the forest gave way to a muddy bank that sloped towards the water. Trees leaned over the Billabong, trying to see their reflection, but the only things they could make out were the first stars of the evening twinkling across the surface. A mob of kangaroos drank their fill, then hopped away. From the middle of the Billabong, an island rose as round and green as a turtle's back. "How am I going to get over there?" Mara moaned. She walked to the edge of the water, hoping there would be someone to tell her how to reach the island. Nothing moved except a large piece of bark floating towards her. As she stared at the bark, a wild idea galloped into her mind. She used her stick to drag the bark closer to her, and then she stepped onto it. Pushing herself across the Billabong with the stick, she soon reached the island with a shuddering scrape. Mara toppled forward off the bark and stood up, quivering. To her left and right, waves lapped gently against the gravelly shore. Bats flew overhead, their wings whomp, whomp, whomping across the sapphire sky. Her nose caught a whiff of a weird scent wafting from the centre of the island. It must be the mugwump. Threading her way through the tall grass, Mara wondered what the mugwump looked like. Was he kind? Would he help her? Glancing at her coat, she yelped in dismay at her dirty fur. She licked herself as she walked, cleaning off the worst of the mud and slime. By the time she had left the last of the grass behind her, she was almost back to her old self. In front of her, the ground climbed up to the highest point on the island, where a gum tree teetered in the breeze. And sitting under the tree, surrounded by a crazy collection of critters, was the largest frog that she had ever seen. Mara crept closer. "We have a visitor," the mugwump announced. "She seems a little ruffled." The other animals turned to gape at Mara, and a mumble hummed through the group. "Hello, sir," Mara stuttered, trying to flatten her scruffy fur. "I heard that you are the cleverest creature in the bush, so I was wondering if you could help me." A sticky tongue shot out of the mugwump's mouth and snatched a bug out of the air. "Perhaps. What is your problem?" Mara cleared her throat. I'm not brave enough to glide through the sky." The mugwump winked one eye, then the other. "Codswallop," he croaked. "Pardon?" said Mara. "My flying friends followed every step of your journey, and they told me that you are fearless in the face of danger." "That doesn't sound like me," Mara murmured. The mugwump snorted. "Who boldly left their tree-hollow nest?" "Me," replied Mara. "Who stout-heartedly stood up to a snake?" "Me," said Mara with a smile. "Who courageously crossed the Billabong on their own?" "Me," shouted Mara, banging her stick on the ground. The mugwump puffed out his chest. "So what are you going to do now?" Mara tugged at her tiny whiskers. "I'm going to glide." She cantered through the animals and bolted up the gum tree. Her heartbeats boomed like thunder in her ears. "Don't look down," she thought as she edged along the high branch. Then, with a squeal, she launched herself from the tree. As she sailed over the cheering crowd and past the glittery great Billabong, the wind tickled her toes and smoothed her fur. "Gliding is so much fun," Mara hollered happily to the heavens.